Chapter 14, Psychosocial Development in Young Adulthood. There are a lot of influences on how we get to adulthood. Gender is important. Not as much as it used to be. It used to be much more women were going to get married. That was kind of the premise of the situation. Men were going to get an education, get a job, and before they got married. But it's still expectations, discrimination, things like that do impact us. Academic ability, if you are good at school, good at academics, then you are much more likely to go on and go to college. Early attitudes towards education, we've talked about that a number of times. Expectations in late adolescence, again, things have changed, but there are still a lot of things that are very similar. So who you are depends a lot on what the expectations are going to be in late adolescence, whether you're going to go to college, go to work, that sort of thing, get married. Social class, higher SES tends to have more choices. Lower SES, they tend to get a job if they make it all the way through high school. Ego development, how far along, just your maturity level. Identity development. We talked about in adolescence that Erickson thought that we were trying to, that's a moratorium, adolescence is a moratorium, and we are trying to figure out what our identity is. As with the rest of us, our identity will continue to develop throughout the lifespan. Contemporary moratorium. We talked some about that, just the different times that you're going to have to come up, make decisions and come up with new plans. Never growing up, I think, is an option. I've tried real hard, at least in a lot of ways, to not grow up. I will admit, though, that being a parent kind of enforces some thought processes that are more adult, more grown up than others. Racial ethnic identity exploration. There is problems with that as far as it goes. Maintaining a strict ethnic or racial identity may restrict opportunities. Buying more into the general power structure may get you accused of being a sellout, an Uncle Tom, an Oreo. There are a number of things that people call other people who they think are not being true to their race. Adult relationships with parents. I'm trying to do this with my 20-year-old. I never really got to do this with my father. He died when I was 18. Building an adult relationship with my mother has been interesting and a bit of a challenge. I'm sure she still sees us as her kids, and we still see her as our mom, but we do have to try to get past that stuff and become independent, but still be able to maintain relationships with the parents. It's not that way for everybody. Some people are just waiting for their parents to die. Then they won't have to worry about them or won't have to deal with them anymore. Again, for lots of people, family is a wonderful thing, but not for everybody. We do tend to get along better if we do what is expected of us as far as our development, getting a job, getting our education and getting a job, having relationships, that sort of thing. But again, there are some people who never get out of the house. So as far as it goes, that can be problematic. Failure to launch. Adult children who continue to live with parents. Again, in my opinion, my 20-year-old is a failure to launch. Kind of wish he could get past it. I do understand, though. I have trouble identifying with it. I was in such a hurry to get out of the house and out of Brownfield that I was, just as soon as I could, I was gone. And I do know that my oldest had trouble coming back, but he had more trouble staying in Austin than he did coming back to Lubbock. Real quick on personality development, normative stage models, timing of events model, trait models, typological models, 4 different views. Erickson is a normative stage model. Excuse me. The crisis is intimacy versus isolation. He said that young adults must make commitments to others or face isolation and self-absorption. You probably know some people are real loners. And I think it's coming more of an option, more of a tendency as time goes on. I know quite a few people who are in their 30s and even into their 40s and 50s who just either don't plan on getting married, haven't found the right person, whatever the situation may be. And as far as I can tell, at least in early and middle adulthood, there aren't a huge number of drawbacks as far as that goes. Kind of depends on the person you are. I don't know that everybody's built to be in long-term committed relationships. But hopefully most everybody gets into some relationships. They tend to have happier, healthier lives. The virtue of this one is love, commitment. And Erickson's kind of interesting. He thought that best kind of love really had to do with both partners having orgasm at the same time. We kind of have that belief in our society and system. Studies of women so that they may have different psychological and environment constraints in forming life structure than men do. Again, there are a number of things that happen. There are expectations, there are messages that we've talked about, women not being as capable and such, that they tend to get from a very young age, very often from their parents, from the teachers, from everybody. Pregnancies can cause problems. Women still are getting paid about 80 cents on the dollar for a man with equal ability and experience. Transitions tend to take longer. And really, when we look at Erickson, a lot of his problem is he really was mainly studying white guys in the 40s and 50s and such. So not a lot of ability to generalize to females and such, or generalize as to what is happening in our society today to everyone. He did use small and limited samples. They were looking at people who had undergone specific things that happened to them, and again, the things that have happened to us within our lifetimes are very different than what happened to our parents or grandparents in their lifetimes. So talk to your grandparents. Most of you it'll be your grandparents. For a few of you it'll be your parents. For my parents, they were children during the Depression, and it made a big impact on a lot of them. And we're not having the economic expansion like they did after World War II. We're having an economic contraction. I don't know that we'll ever have an economic expansion like that again. Timing of events model. We all have what are called milestone events, very important things that happen or don't happen to us, things that are expected to happen. And whether these happen, how they happen, when they happen, may impact us very much. Normative life events are the events that we consider normal. Normative, normal. We expect these things to happen. We go to school, we get born, we go to school, we start driving at a certain time, we graduate, we either go to college or go to work, we get married, we don't. But do know that if you get very old and you haven't gotten married, there's a real good chance your parents and or grandparents will be questioning you about these sorts of things. So they can be on time or off time. And this is really according to a social clock. Social clock is just what our society expects of us now. So, again, when I graduated, the general expectation was that we would be married by 22, 23 and having kids shortly after that. Now most of y'all are putting off until the late 20s, mid to late 20s getting married, and later than that to have children. So the social clock changes. A couple of examples as far as off time. Girls who turn into women at 9, that tends to have negative effects on them. The loss of a child is that's really not expected in our society anymore. So that is something that happens, it's really a non-normative event anymore. The loss of my father at 18 was actually more non-normative for my little brother. He was only 9 when it happened. So these things tend to have negative impacts. Typological models, personality affects and reflects attitudes, how we think about things, whether we're positive or negative about life in general, values, what's important to us, our belief systems, our social interactions, are they positive or negative? According to typological models, our personality impacts just about everything. These peoples did use interviews, self-reports, clinical assessments, and behavior ratings. They found 3 different personality types. Ego resilient. These people are able to bounce back from harsh things. They tend to be pretty positive in their outlooks and beliefs. They feel good about themselves and their ability to accomplish things. Over-controlled people. These can be shy. This could be OCD type behavior where they are really afraid to let themselves loose. Let their hair down is another way of looking at it. And they tend to try to keep themselves under control. Too much superego, according to Freud, too much conscience, too much guilt. Under control. This is me at heart, but again, being a parent has kind of changed this. I'm much more controlled than I used to be, and much more controlled than I really like to be. So I think you know where we're going with that one. These 3 types differ in the ability, ego resiliency, adaptability under stress. Over-controlled people, under-controlled people may not adapt well. Under-controlled people may not feel any stress. Over-controlled people may be way too stressed out. Ego control also. intimate relationship, self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is what you tell about yourself to other people. In relationships, it is self-disclosure is generally should be a pretty equal thing, because when you self-disclose, you give power to people. You give them power over you. You expose your buttons. You make yourself vulnerable and open to them, and this can be problematic. Self-awareness and empathy is important. Well, back to self-disclosure just a second. Your ego, your self-efficacy beliefs have a lot to do with this, because it's a lot easier to open up to people if you believe that you can handle being screwed over by them, being harmed by them. Self-awareness and empathy is important, along with the self-disclosure, because it's hard to really self-disclose if you don't really understand why you do things, you don't understand who you are. Empathy is important in any relationship, but particularly very close relationships. Being able to put yourself in your partner's place, to understand why they feel the way they do, is very important. It goes communication and relational satisfaction are really closely tied. And those two are tied to sexual satisfaction and relationship also. Your ability to communicate your emotions. Males tend to be kind of uncommunicative about their emotions. I think it's getting better, but we still get those messages when we're growing up that boys don't cry, they don't communicate, they don't really have emotions as far as it's concerned, at least not that we show people. I do recommend changes in that. Women, on the other hand, have been reinforced generally to express themselves and their emotions, and fairly generally women set the emotional tone of communications in relationships. Conflict resolution skills, just how to get through with the arguments, the conflict. Giving in is an option for sure, but it shouldn't be the same person giving in all the time. If it's kind of that sort of thing, then take turns giving in. Compromise is definitely an option, something that has to happen real often. It is important, though, to kind of focus on yourself as far as don't avoid saying things like, well, you, because that is blame. It tends to put up barriers to working things out. So focus more on expressing how you feel. I feel this way when you do that, rather than, you make me feel this way. Again, taking responsibility for your own emotions, your own feelings, is part of adulthood. Commitment is important. That may be one of the reasons that cohabitation isn't as successful as marriage. Commitment is kind of basic, and part of it is a commitment to get past the hard times if you really want to be with somebody. Because in a long-term relationship, you're not going to feel the same all the time about the person that you're with. Sexual decision-making should be a consensual thing worked out by both people. Sex is a real important part of any successful, intimate, long-term relationship, or let's say most intimate, long-term relationships. Friendship. Go back one. Well, generally find their friends in young adulthood, at work, or as parents, that sort of thing. A lot of times we don't have time to go out and find friends in other situations, though church can work. It does tend to be sharing advice and confidences, particularly if you're parents. You're looking for lots of advice on lots of different things. Advice on work, that sort of thing. Social needs are fulfilled by friends. Women just in general are more social creatures than men are, and have more needs met by their friends than men. Men often, if they need anybody, just need their partner. At least some feel that way. Sternberg's triangular theory of love, I kind of like this one. Talks about 3 elements of love. There's intimacy. Intimacy is how close you are, how emotional you are, or it's the emotional element, and it does involve self-disclosure, because if you don't self-disclose and your partner doesn't self-disclose, then you don't build intimacy. Passion is considered the motivational element. This is arousal, lust. This tends to be very strong early in a relationship, and then tends to kind of cool off over time. The kind of passion that we usually have in the first few months of a relationship is virtually impossible to maintain. And that is why some people keep feeling like they really weren't in love with that person, and they keep breaking up after their love cools, their passion cools, and they keep looking for that relationship that will keep them passionate at that same level forever. I don't think that those exist, but it is kind of what we get from a lot of the media and stuff. Happily ever after. Commitment is the cognitive, the thoughtful part. Decision to love and stay with the beloved. Again, I've been with my partner legally for almost 30 years, and we dated for a couple of years before that. And I will tell you, what you're trying to do is to maintain a balance of these, all 3. But it doesn't happen. There are times when you are not communicating, maybe you're not getting along real well, and the intimacy goes away. Fairly often with intimacy also goes passion. There's times, particularly when you have children, if you have children, when the passion goes away because you're just too busy to be passionate, that's when commitment is really important. Commitment and the realization that goes with commitment that once you get through the difficulties, once you get through the whatever you're going through at that time, that there is a chance that again in the future you will feel the intimacy and at least some of the passion. Intimacy and commitment do tend to grow over time, which helps balance out the passion. But I don't know, I'm still pretty passionate about my partner. Single life is real common. There are a lot of people out there in the late 20s, early 30s who are not married. So about a third of women and almost half of men. So it is a pretty common situation. Dating is important. Friendship's important in that time. Comparing gay and lesbian relationships, a good half to most of gay men and lesbians are in romantic relationships. There really aren't very many differences between gay and lesbian relationships and heterosexual ones. The main difference is that heterosexuals can get married if they want to. Most gays and lesbians can't. I do think that this is going to change, though, before too long. They are, well, they're more equal, generally, as far as their relationships. And they tend to be less negative in their conflicts, less likely to call names, less likely to place blame, at least to a degree. They do tend to be less stable, and I think a lot of people would prefer it that way. They don't like the idea of stable and healthy relationships between people who are same-sex oriented. I think that as the world changes, as our attitudes change, this will change also. Of course, when you look at heterosexual relationships, there's a whole lot of them that aren't stable either. It is a movement around the world and in the United States. Some point to Maine and say, well, see, there's proof that I think 31 or 33 states have laws against marriage. California, after the Supreme Court decision, passed a resolution to ban gay marriage again. It is being challenged, and the challenge, last I heard, the Attorney General for the state was refusing to defend Proposition 8, I think it was. He himself thinks that it is illegal and unconstitutional. There is now a Texas court case that is going that way, and it also is challenging the constitutionality of marriage bans. I feel the federal judge has declared it the Texas law and amendment unconstitutional, and I feel pretty sure that the U.S. Supreme Court will find it unconstitutional also. Cohabitation, unmarried couples who are involved in a sexual relationship and live together. So this is not roomies. This is a different type of relationship, a somewhat similar to marriage relationship. .4% of U.S. households are cohabiting. I think that's a typo. Over half of U.S. couples who married lived together first. Statistics show that there are higher divorce rates among people who did live together first. That may not be because they lived together. It may show that just be because they were the type of people who really didn't have the commitment to get married, and for whatever reason finally decided to, and they really just never built that commitment. Cohabitation in older people is different. Fairly often people in their 60s, 70s, 80s cohabitate because financially they would take a hit by getting married. Though sometimes they understand that they have a very limited amount of time, so the extra hassles of getting married are just not worth it. Benefits of marriage, and there are some. Division of labor, there's two of you to do it. What one single generally ends up doing. Economic security. Having two incomes is a wonderful thing. Commitment and friendship. Again, my partner and I have been together a long time. We know each other pretty well, and it's real nice to have somebody there with you a lot of the time. Sometimes it's nice to be off and be by myself, but most of the time I'm real happy with the way things are. New sources of identity, self-esteem. Getting married, historically and still in a number of cultures, religions, societies, Mates were and are chosen by professional matchmakers and or parents. It's really been, this love thing has been a pretty short-term situation, and if you look at the divorce rates, they're not that great, so I'm not sure that love is the best indicator of who you should marry. Again, most people are putting off getting married longer. Again, it takes a lot more time to get your education and to get stable as far as getting married is concerned. So the average age is mid to late 20s in most industrialized countries. Over the long term, married people tend to be happier than unmarried people. They tend to be healthier and live longer. But being divorced is often better than being not getting married, or getting a divorce is very often better than being in an unhappy, unsatisfying marriage. Expectations are important. Again, I'm afraid that guys get screwed on this one. Very often, a lot of women go into relationships, particularly marriage, with this happily ever after belief system that they've been taught since they started listening to fairy tales and stuff. I've seen guys are just supposed to be able to do it all on some levels and do it without crying. So really, expecting people to be people is probably the best way to go into the situation. Economic resources. Being poor is stressful. It's stressful anyway. Being poor and in a relationship is still stressful. And financial situations often are major contributors to stress, marital stress, and divorce. And having kids just adds to that. Having an equal relationship as far as power and decision making is important. Again, that's not how it used to be. Women were supposed to submit to their lords. It's come a long way from that. But again, when we look at same-sex marriages, they tend to be more equal. Non-traditional gender attitudes are important. Gender attitudes are changing. And so, non-traditional, meaning more modern, is pretty important. Most women and men are not going to put up with the old attitudes. Factors in marital success: partner's happiness with the relationship. Very often one partner is much happier than the other one. Both being there is important. Sensitivity to each other is very important. Being open and talking. Validating in communication and emotional ways how each person feels in the relationship. Communication is extremely important. Communication. Conflict management skills, being able to resolve conflict without damage, because the name calling, the blame can be overlooked, but it tends to damage things on the long term. Age at marriage: the earlier the marriage occurs, the more likely it is to end in divorce. It's not always that way, but it tends. One of the biggest stressors is children. Generally, marriage undergoes, marital satisfaction undergoes what's called a U-shaped curve, wherein they kind of the opposite of a bell curve. When they are first together in the marriage, in the relationship, the satisfaction tends to be high. Then when babies are born, satisfaction plummets. It tends to be a little bit better when they are in middle childhood, because babies are tough. Babies take a lot of time and effort. People don't get much sleep. Then you're going to have another real hard time during adolescence, when you've got adolescents around the house, because adolescents are much more complicated. There tends to be more disagreement as to how best to deal with the problems of adolescence, and so it tends to be pretty negative on its impact on marital satisfaction. But if they can get past the kids and get them out of the house, then research shows that marital satisfaction can go up and even higher than it was when the couple was first married, because they've been through all that. They're friends now instead of just lovers. They've put in all this commitment of staying together, undergone all this, all the things that they've gone through, and so they just know each other a lot better. So those last years can be much better than the first years. Going to college tends to help marriages stay intact. Going to college does all sorts of things. Going to college also decreases sexual dysfunctions and increases sexual satisfaction. Mothers are waiting longer to have babies. Involvement in parenthood, it's very complicated. Mothers do tend to be more involved than fathers, though there is variation in that, and fathers are doing better about being more involved now. As far as women complaining of more housework and marital conflict, this can be to a great degree resolved, prevented, made better by equal responsibilities. And those fathers who are involved tend to be more satisfied with their lives. If those who aren't involved, it very often is because they are working all the time, and that's not always the best, most satisfying way to live. So talked about this. Marital satisfaction declines during the childhood years, especially infanthood and adolescence. Women who feel competent, who have good self-efficacy beliefs, tend to do better. Benefits of dual earner families. Lots of benefits. Just the stress levels of having the money come in, being able to pay for health care, having that equality. It used to be that it was real hard for women to leave harmful relationships because they couldn't afford to. And women who do get a divorce are more likely to go into poverty now. But if they've had some experience, if they've had a job, then they're more likely to be able to deal with the situation. And I can't tell you how much better it is for me now that there are two people who are bringing in money instead of just me. Some drawbacks, possible rivalry. Men or in the past anyway, and probably to a degree now, tend to want to earn more than their partner does. I don't have that problem. Extra demands on time and energy, there is definitely that. When my partner stayed at home, she took care of the house, took care of the kids, I took care of making the money. Now we're both trying to do all of it. It's a lot harder. Fortunately, the boys are older now and can do a number of things on their own and even help out. I've told you often, parenting is guilt. Guilt about meeting their financial needs, guilt about meeting their emotional, their educational needs, just all the things that children need. And once you have them, they're yours forever. It's till you die. Okay. Effects on marriage. Dual income families have many different forms. It is now about a little over a third of an average family income is females of the woman, though that's probably gone up too. Women now are half the workforce. Women do work generally a good 10 hours longer per week, even if they're working the same hours as the husband. You've heard about the 7-year itch. Well, this is a little bit of support for that. That's the average. But really, when you look at it, a lot of the marriages end after 1 year or within the first year, and very few really end after 25 or 30 years. So I think that the 7 to 8 is a statistical thing, not really when it's most likely to happen. About 20% of adults have been divorced, twice as high as maybe when your grandparents got married. Lots of reasons: incompatibility, lack of communication, lack of support, lack of empathy and caring. Again, lack of career support or lack of support between the career and the home. Spousal abuse is a biggie. It's also problematic because fairly often the abuser becomes, well, when the divorce is brought up, when it's finalized, these are times when abusers may become exceptionally abusive, may become homicidal. Intimate partner violence. Victims generally young, poor, less educated, divorced, or cohabiting. Again, they tend to have fewer options, have more trouble getting away, financing, being able to get away. 3 types of violence: situational couple violence, emotional abuse, intimate terrorism. Situational couple abuse, well, I don't like to talk much about the abuse, but I think we all have known somebody in an abusive situation, even if we didn't know that it was abusive. Shelter and law enforcement can give support. The woman's protective, I can't remember the name of it, but there is a group that will house women and their children and protect them, Women's Protective Services. Sorry. Here, law enforcement can provide support. You can get restraining orders, but restraining orders don't stop guns, don't stop bullets, don't stop women being killed. So, sometimes women have to leave the entire city and go someplace totally new to be safe. Divorce is tough. It's tougher on men than it is on women. Women may actually benefit from divorces. Men are much more likely to remarry after a divorce. Disruption of parent-child relationships, problematic. Loss of emotional support, because, of course, that may be one of the reasons for divorce, but it also can impact relationships with the ex-in-laws, with friends, because sometimes the friends don't want to take sides, or they do take sides, and sometimes a single person is seen as a threat, whereas a married person is not. discord with former spouse, economic hardship, and again, I think I mentioned that women are more likely to have problems with finances after the divorce. 1/3 of U.S. marriages are remarriages for both people involved. 1/4 of those cohabitated first. It takes a while, but it can be worked out. I think it may be a little bit easier now since the divorce is so common. There's been a lot more research. It's not as stigmatized as it used to be, but it's